doesn't understand the property market because it said in there, surprisingly, these first-time buyers are not so concerned about stamp duty. Yeah, that's basically because they hardly pay any. You're just saying they're much more concerned, of course, about things like getting help to buy back, or at least some sort of mortgage guarantee scheme. They want to try and get their costs covered early doors. But what it means is that we have got, whether it's just the first time buyers or whether it is a general malaise across the entire property market, we've got this budget paralysis, something we predicted literally the week after the budget date was announced. Outrageously, by the way, announced way too early. And then, of course, the government has gone through a process of doing this horrific floating of ideas. They leak potential mansion tax, this, that, and the other, all the rest of it, of course, which sends us all running around, widdershins around the back garden, worrying about what's actually coming. I've tried to suggest, we've only got 3 weeks now. Budget's on the 26th. I've tried to suggest at the end of this a few ways you might be able to ease some of that budget paralysis. We'll see. Sorry about this being a text-heavy slide. There's more for my benefit than for yours, so it's an aid memoir for me. But essentially, this is what's going on. 3 weeks from the budget, November the 26th. The rumours about what tax changes are going to be are rife. The one thing that we know beyond any doubt is that we are all going to be paying more tax post-budget, or the vast majority of us paying more tax post-budget than before. And that has made people pause for thought. I'll come back to that in a moment too. I don't know whether you saw, but mortgage approvals now are back up to almost 66,000. The last numbers we've got, September numbers, 66,000. And that, of course, is the classic number. It was 65,900, I think. The classic number is 66,000 because 66,000 mortgage approvals means 100,000 completions, means 1.2 million sales a year. That is the average in the UK. If you take the normal years before COVID arrived and the Russians started taking over the world, 2014 to 2019, it was always 1.2 million transactions a year. And the new homes industry had about 10.5% of that for spec build, by the way, not including bulk sales. So that's going on. Nationwide, took a blip up against all the odds, only a tiny blip up. I'll come to the Nationwide in a minute or two, but it shocked everybody because we all know it's seriously tough out there. I nearly used a swear word then, managed to control myself just at the last moment. But that took a blip up. There's an issue with the Nationwide algorithm because of the way it's worked. And don't get me wrong, I, along with everyone else in the world, doesn't really understand the Nationwide algorithm. I don't even know that they understand it, quite honestly. But because they take volume of sales rather than value, and they adjust those volumes to be a percentage of the overall housing stock in any one area, where you get a situation that we've got at the moment with quite a big north-south divide. So really good market up in the northwest, dreadful market down in the southeast. It throws the market out, throws the balance out. Consumer confidence has recovered a little bit, unbelievably, but recovered a little bit on the latest numbers. I'll talk you through those in a minute or two. And of course, we all know, don't we? What are we going to be doing at noon today? We're going to be sat around the telly or the radio waiting to see what the Chancellor has done, or not the Chancellor, sorry, the MPC has done with interest rates. We'll come back to that in a moment or two as well. That's today at noon. But we do know inflation stuck at 3.8% last month. Good news. But the owner operating housing costs on inflation came down again. That's very good news. Government long-term borrowing still too high. Okay, let's have a look at some key dates. Well, the first one, of course, is today. Now, I don't know whether you're a betting person or not, but it is absolutely 50-50 as to whether or not there's going to be a 25-point cut today. My money, for what that's worth, is that there will be. I think we're going to see 25 points come off. I was on the fence, and then I read this morning first thing that Barclays and their team of economists, I understand, is about 640 people or something, as against me. They reckon there's a 25-point cut coming. That will make a difference. It's an opportunity to take advantage of the headlines that will be in the press the following day. Of that, you can be sure. And then after that, there's one more MPC meeting before the end of the year. That's the 18th of December. I'll tell you what, if it doesn't come down today, it will definitely come down in December. So one way or another, we'll be 25 points further south than we are now. And as you know, this is what's happened with interest rates. Look, here we were going along. This is post the 2008-9 meltdown, interest rates absolutely on the floor, the lowest in history. And then, of course, we had our exit out of COVID. The world went mad. The market went mad. 2022 was a bonkers market, wasn't it? And so that's when the interest rates started racking up. Of course, at the same time, we had Russia invading Ukraine and oil prices, commodity prices going through the roof. And we had 16 interest rate rises. And what's a lovely, in that little period there, from the end of 2021 right up to when they first started coming down here in 2023. And here's the thing, that is exactly the same number of housing ministers there were in the Conservative government from start to finish. 16. What a lovely, a very elegant coincidence. Next, inflation numbers are really important. That's November 19. If there's no 25-point reduction today, then these inflation numbers will really matter, because that's going to have a big effect on what happens on that December decision. And here's where they sit right now. You can see interest rates have started to look as though they were going to climb back up, and they have just faltered a little bit and stopped. That's why I think we might see that reduction today. But the dark line you can see on that screen are the OOH inflation numbers. And that means owner, occupier, housing costs. So the stuff like the mortgage and the stuff like their property taxes, they are really important, because they are your buyers or prospective buyers. And their inflation continues to fall and now sits at just 5.2%. And when you think that wage inflation right now is sitting around 5%, that's pretty much neutral. So from the amount of money that someone's prospective home buyers got in their pocket, that's good news. But the big thing, of course, is the budget. So whatever it is I'm telling you today, and the forecast that I'm about to give you for what I think is going to happen through next year, it's all bets are off depending on what Rachel does in the budget. The property market is low-hanging fruit, isn't it? It's an easy one to attack. I think there's going to be no question she's going to be coming for us. It's just in what form. And you might have noticed on that earlier slide that I put up, I talked about the effect with that seesaw. I'll come back to that in a moment or two, the effect that some of these taxes might have. But just as a flavour, this outrageous thing that they're doing here of running out these, what do they call it? Running the flag up the flagpole and see who salutes. So offering up these suggestions of new taxes and see who makes the most fuss. The change in stamp duty, it's been mooted. And of course, you've got two of the other parties, I think, both Reform and the Conservatives now, saying they're going to do away with it altogether. And that again, of course, is a possibility, and changing it into a general property tax. Moving the stamp duty liability from buyers to sellers. Now, that is an extraordinary thing. Now, try and work that one out. Here's something, by the way, confidentially, and I only tell you confidentially is because I don't want all my competitors beating me to the mark on this. We've actually got a market research panel standing by for the day after budget day. So we're going to be able to get a real sense of how it's going to make consumers react. We don't know what's going to be in there yet. Nobody does. No, nobody does. And we're going to see how consumers react and how that's going to affect the market afterwards. But there are all these possibilities. And what this does is it creates this sentiment seesaw. And the reason I call it a seesaw is it's the good and the bad between the buyer and the seller. Hang on, I've gone two there. Let me just go back one there. So change in stamp duty. So both buyers and sellers are feeling negative about that, because they feel for buyers, they think it's going to cost them more money potentially. For sellers, they think that's going to put more pressure on their price because they're going to have to make allowances for increase in stamp duty. It's negative all round. The shift of stamp duty liability from buyer to a seller, well, of course, buyers feel very positive about that. Sellers are feeling pretty negative about that, hardly surprising. And then replacing stamp duty, and of course, all people involved in the property market feel very positive about that. In other words, the whole of the economy shares the burden of those property taxes. Can't see that one somehow, not this. One of the big problems with stamp duty is it generates the best part of 16 billion pounds a year for the economy, and that's a big old chunk of money to hand away. You have to stick it, you have to find it somewhere else, that's for sure. But the point I'm making here is that we've got this swing backwards and forwards, and that's led to this uncertainty. And let me tell you in no uncertain terms that the biggest enemy to any market is uncertainty. It's worse than bad news. No news worse than bad news. Let me take you through the current GfK consumer confidence numbers. The reason I focus on this a little bit and pay a bit more attention to it is because this is my cheat sheet. This chart here, if you take this line, this red line here, which is the overall index score, and you move that forward 6 months, that is absolutely the profile of deals done at asking price and better. People say, oh, I'm very impressed with your forecasting over the next 6. Yeah, it's a cheat. I take that line. It's an absolute. Consumer confidence is such a huge factor in the decision-making process. And that is why these numbers are important. What happens? GfK, a national opinion polls it used to be 50 odd years ago. They've been running this survey for 54 years, I think it is. They asked 2,000 people across the UK every month, over the next 12 months, are things going to get better or worse? It's as simple as that. These are people from 16 to 85 years old. The red line there is the overall index score. And if you see the yellow line going through the chart is 0. Now, if I ask 2,000 people, is going to things get better or worse? 1,000 say better and 1,000 say worse. The result would be 0. So if it's below that line, it means the majority of people responding say they think things are going to get worse. And you can see where that red line is well into negative. These are record lows. The only time in all the 50 years these numbers have been down here was immediately after the Liz Truss quasi-Kwarteng budget in September 2022. The green line there is the next 12 months a good time to make a major purchase? A house, a car, a kitchen. And you can see that also is well into negative, but took quite a nice uptick last month. Those figures, by the way, last month were collected in the first 2 weeks of October. The next numbers come out in a couple of weeks' time. The blue line there, which is virtually based in Australia, it's so low. Is the economy going to do better or worse over the next 12 months? And you can see where the UK population feel the economy is going over the next 12 months. But even that took a tiny little uptick. So there is some positivity there. What's really important is this little mauve line at the top. That mauve line, the question is, how are your personal finances going to do over the next 12 months? Are you going to be better off or worse off? And that is remarkably resilient. That sits there along that 0 line, and that's hugely important to us and hugely important to how people react when they walk into your sales office, how people react when they're making their buying decision. That is not bad news. It's flat news, and that is advising my forecast for prices and volumes for next year. I'll go into more detail in a moment. Okay, so the way I try and work out how the market's going to move, because in the end, it doesn't matter whether you're Savills with a whole bunch of people who, by the way, have just changed their forecast for next year for the 3rd time. Mine is still the same as it was and still closer, by the way. So it doesn't matter whether you're Savills or whether you're me, somebody's going to have to guess, aren't they? Because the future hasn't happened yet, so I can't actually go and look the answer up. There has to be, you go take in all the information. With all the clients that we look at, I'm looking at data from around about 800 live sites every single week. So I'm getting a huge amount of immediate feedback from sales offices in all parts of the UK, and of course all my other external data sources, most of which, by the way, are freely available. And with that, I then produce this. This is my little magic thing there. And for those of you that think I've got the date wrong there, November 2024, I haven't. That's last year. I wanted to show you and contrast it with where we are now. Okay, so have a look at this. This is where we were. This is where I saw us last year. The blue panels on here are things you can do. So these are things that are in your gift. Discounting off selling prices, Financial products. How many of you work your IFAs till the soles of their shoes fall off? Because right now, that IFA is an incredibly important person. They should be in every single one of your marketing meetings, by the way. Part exchange. I don't know how many of you, obviously with R&Bs, with regional bespokes, with smaller developers, PX is a challenge because obviously there's inventory cost and all sorts of things. But right now, PX is a massively valuable weapon, especially when we're in times like we are now, coming up to the budget and all this uncertainty. Mauve is government stuff. And you can see even back November last year, stamp duty changes were right down here in the bottom right-hand corner. This matrix, by the way, anything at the top is positive. People react positively. Anything down at the bottom, they react negatively. Over to the left, low impact, insidious, slow burn. Over to the right, very high impact. The place we really want to be nirvana is the top right-hand corner. The hell in a handcart is bottom right-hand corner. And you can see there, stamp duty. Do you remember there were the changes coming up last March when they were doing away with there'd been the previous government, Jeremy Hunt, had actually introduced a stamp duty concession, and it went at the end of March. And of course, that had a big effect on volumes. Consumer confidence sat down here. High mortgage rates were here, low affordability, all in this dreadful bottom right-hand corner. Mortgage availability, the lenders were tripping over themselves to try and lend money, was very good. Lifestyle changes. Remember the race for space during COVID and all that, when that thing used to be right up here, and it's not really, doesn't have that impact anymore. The employment market isn't what it was. That sits back here. That's moving into negative. Supply and demand. You can see, right, let's move forward a year to literally, I did this exercise just this weekend, ready for next week's market cast, and it sort of looks a bit like this now. The sharp-eyed ones amongst you will notice there is a new box on that chart that wasn't there in November, and it's called the uncertainty index, because right now that is simply and straightforwardly the biggest hurdle to sales. People are going to wait. They're worried. It's such a golden excuse. If people, even if they're not uncertain, it's the easy thing to say if they don't want to do a deal, if they want to delay. Yeah, I'm going to wait to the budget. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. It's a very easy thing to say in any negotiation process, isn't it? But you can see here, uncertainty, the stamp duty changes. Everyone's worried about that. Those two things are linked, but they are right down there in the bottom right-hand corner. Look at these things. Part exchange now is so important. If you can give people certainty where they are on the horns of a dilemma with the uncertainty created by the budget noise and furor, well, then that is massive. And that probably more importantly than beating your competitors, because most of those will be offering PX2, it gives you a huge leg up over the second-hand market. In tough markets, the new home share always goes up. You know, the new home share generally running about 10%. Let me tell you, in 2009, at the very height of the crash, the new home share in the market reached over 16%. So it's just worth bearing that in mind. You have these things in your gift. Obviously, it's attritional as far as margin is concerned, and I'm aware of that. And the last thing any marketer ever wants to say to his client is cut your prices. But sometimes that's obviously, that all comes down to current position of every individual business. So have a quick look at the indices then. A right move. It blipped up. These numbers came out last week. It blipped up by 0.3%. At this time of year, you would have expected that to be about 1.2%. So these are asking prices. So asking prices of properties that came onto the market during September, October. So bear that in mind. These properties won't be sold at these prices. So that's the important thing. Rightmove said, I've just picked one line out of there. Market remains resilient, but not strong enough to drive the usual autumn bounce. They don't mention, of course, well, they do further down the budget, but that's sitting behind that. Regionally, this is how it looks. These regions, it's that classic old phrase, One of my clients, a client that Carl Pickering knows very well, an extraordinary man called Terry Flower, who famously said to me about 100 years ago when I was talking to about average prices when he was really struggling. And he said, Matt, he said, if you take a man and you stick his head in the oven and you stick his feet in the freezer, is he on average comfortable? And of course, that's how much use generally averages are. So I worry about this sort of thing, but the public lap it up. And of course, all that feeds back in then to confidence and perception. But you can see generally across the UK, it all looks a bit moribund. And with Scotland in growth and Wales in growth. But if you come down into the Midlands and certainly down into the southeast, it's a real struggle. The nationwide numbers are very different from Rightmove. Rightmove are asking prices. The nationwide numbers are based on mortgage approvals. And so you can see there, look, October, is my coffee mug in the way? October, it blipped up from 2.2% annual inflation to 2.4 annual inflation. I think that's a bit of an issue with the algorithm. And I would suggest certainly that people selling in the southeast of the country have not experienced that. I've ringed this just for a bit of interest. They always stick a little chart when the numbers come out. They come out at the end of each month. So this is about 5 days old. This chart here. They always put something quite interesting there. I always have a little look at that. There's a fantastic little clue here. They did a survey, the nationwide most popular renovations amongst homeowners who've renovated in the last 5 years. Have a look at that. Look, massive out on their own, over 70%. Kitchen and bathroom renovation, right in your wheelhouse. So all of your sales teams, your sales staff, or if you're selling yourself on site, you need that. I mean, I'd almost stick it in the frame and because they've got their brand new kitchens and bathrooms, haven't they? So it's so often we forget to push the benefits. We're so anxious to push the deal, we forget to push the benefits of new over secondhand. That I stuck that in there. The trouble with the regional index now nationwide, it used to be monthly, but for the last couple of years it's only quarterly, so it's very quickly out of date. So this is the end of September, but I just stuck that in there to give you a sense of that whole thing about averages and head in the oven and feet in the freezer. You can see there, Northern Ireland almost 10% growth year on year, but if you're in the outer southeast, you've got no growth at all. So we won't dwell on that. The Zoopla index, which I really like, is a blend of mortgage approvals, asking prices and completions. They're currently saying that the average annual price increase is about 1.3%. I think that's bang on. I think that's a good number. I've also ringed on here, look, budget uncertainty is prompting buyers to wait and see, leading to the first annual decline in sales agreed in years, isn't it? Ever. And here's that number, buyer demand -8%. It's the first time that's been in negative for a long time. Flow of new supply hasn't moved barely, but this decline in buyer demand means that stock is up a little bit and sales agreed fallen -3%. That much better reflects the reality that you guys are experiencing in the sales offices around the country right now. And if you want to see how that budget practice paralysis works in practice, you can see here when the budget was announced and how sales rates have moderated since. And if you actually look here at the time to agree a sale down in that bottom right hand chart, hey, don't worry about the detail, the sentiment is the point. 10% slower than a year ago. And if you're in London, well, number one, you're a braver person than me at the moment, but if you're in London, it's 20% slower than it was. People are pausing and hesitating. Remember that little red uncertainty box. This is their UK chart here. Not going to dwell on that, but the cities index is quite interesting here. All of this, by the way, is freely available. Go on the Zoopla website and take your time to have a look through that cities index. What I find fascinating about this cities index is when you're trying to talk to somebody, particularly if you are building in a region, a specific area, is the difference. You know, you think about how margins are under pressure. You've got almost 10% difference between the top and the bottom performing regions in the UK right now. So it's micro marketing for me is absolutely everything. And I say that to my clients. So people, you know, people like Bloor and people like Barrett Redrow and, you know, who have sites all over the UK. Forget the averages. Let's micro market, look at the difficult sites. Let's drill right down into what's going on your doorstep, and let's develop a micro marketing strategy to suit that site. So to best leverage the good markets, and they are still out there, so make best margin on good markets, and equally take a little bit of pain on the worst markets. Don't sit on the product. Mortgage approvals, I think I told you about. We've climbed back up to almost 66,000, 65,900 and 44. Let's not forget the 44. We won't dwell on that. This is quite important, though. This I always keep an eye on the interest rate tracker. The Bank of England publishes this, and this is an amalgamation of interest rates brought together. It's a really easy to read sense of where interest rates are going. The left-hand chart there shows you 2-year fixed interest rates over different loans to value. So the blue line, a very low interest rate at the bottom here, is 60% loan to value, and the green line, the highest one at the top there, is 95% loan to value, and you can see the differences in rate. And currently 2-year money at 90%, which is probably the most popular, certainly for first-time buyers. You can see there 2-year fixed is averaging out at just under 4.6%. Let's hope for a Bank of England cut today by 25 points at noon. And then the right-hand chart, and this is the one I really find interesting. So this is they're all 75% loan to value. The difference in the lines is the term. So your 2-year, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, have a look where that 10-year money's gone. That is the top line. That's the orange line. So that is the banking industry. That's the markets saying how they feel that interest rates are going to go. Residential transactions by month. Well, we've done that. We've sort of said it's come back nearly at the end now. I've perhaps run a tad over where I was supposed to be. It's very difficult to do this in 30 minutes. The September survey from the RICS. Now, don't forget, the members of the RICS are surveyors. So these are the people that are actually coming around and doing the valuations for your purchasers. So what they say is very important. And believe you me, if you think you've met a pessimist in your life, you need to meet these people. I hope you know that they all live in bungalows because they won't allow them to go above first floor height without locks on the windows. And subdued momentum still evident across the sales market. And let me a really quick run through these. So this is the survey. This works on the same basis as the consumer confidence one I told you about earlier. So they ask every agent, and in this there's about 430 odd branches in this survey, and they ask everyone, are things going to get better or worse? If it's better, it comes up above the line, majority. If it's worse, it's below. Regional new buyer inquiries. So with the exception of Northwest, Scotland and Northern Ireland, you can see where we are. So quite a substantial downbeat, regional inquiries over the past month. And I call this the canary slides because this gives advance warning of where the market's going to go. Have I frozen? No, still working. Okay, it's just frozen here for some reason. Regional new vendor instructions here. Again, it's a fantastic canary slide. So that gives you a real sense of how many buyers are coming into the market. And look across the region there, that's all flat as well. We'll leap on. Look at this. Regional newly agreed sales over the past month, you can see, are all significantly in negative. And regional prices for the past 3 months, well, you can see where we are, can't you? You can see right across the regions, with the exception of the Northwest, Scotland and Northern Ireland, all very much in negative. So these are the important ones here. So these are volumes. So this is asking the surveyors, do you think the volume of sales is going to go up or down? And you can see national sales expectations. The little mauve line there is over the next 3 months. The azure dotted blue line there is over the next year. And you can see that has finally moved into negative. So the surveyors believe there will be fewer sales next year than this year. And you can see by region that all sits centered in London and the southeast. And prices, well, prices over the next 3 months, they see that being in negative. But over the next year, they still see that there will be some price growth in this market. Really, that's a really important piece of data there. Regional price expectations. Look at this. This is where they think prices are going to go over the next 3 months. Well, you don't need to be a genius. If the monitor wasn't so big, I'd tip it up and turn it up the other way just to try and make you happier. But in the meantime, I think we've got to be prepared for some significant, substantial price pressures over the next 3 months. Where's it going to go then? Q4 and next year. 2 minutes on this because I'd spend longer, but we've got the budget coming up in 3 weeks' time, and that could render all of this completely pointless. This is where we've been this year. I believe you should always pick an index to judge yourself against. I picked the nationwide. I have done for about the last 10 years or so, just to see if we're on the right track. Remember the comment about averages, though. So this is where we've been. The dark blue lines are solid. This is inflation. You can see, so this is prices higher than this time the previous year. By the time we got to October last month, 2.4% higher than it was the previous October. I am forecasting that dips. To be fair, I did forecast that October was going to dip as well, but it didn't. It surprised me. But I forecast that it's going to dip down to about 1.5%. And then I think in December, that's 1.5% is where we're going to end the year. But that, quite honestly, that deal is done. That's old news. Next year. And you can see, so all of those are forecast numbers. And essentially what we're talking about there is a market that is flat. It's absolutely flat. And I'm saying that we are going to end the end of next year fractionally below in terms of average price, fractionally below where we are this time next year. But don't forget, region to region can vary by as much as 10%. Micro marketing is everything. Let me leave you with this as a suggestion. The red line, by the way, at the top is the actual average price, and you can see it ending up I believe, in my opinion, it's going to end up about 272,000 according to the nationwide. I told AI to create me a picture of somebody that was worried about what might happen in the budget, and instead it's creating me a picture of an ad for Imodium diarrhea tablets. Didn't quite get the what I wanted, but on a budget of 0, it's going to have to do for today.
Matt, now, right, sorry.
So, right, 4 ways to counter. Here we go. I'll leave you with this as a suggestion, and please watch the very clever lady on the left getting happier as we go along. 1, there's nothing you can do about what's going to be in the budget. It's out with your control, as is the general market. But what is in your control is to create some certainty. Picture in your head that little red uncertainty box, move it back, move it left, and move it up towards the middle line. Create certainty. Do a deal with your IFAs. Do a fixed mortgage deal over the next 2 years. Take away the uncertainty, and that gives you a massive advantage over the second-hand market. 2, use the budget. It's the 26th of November. Now, I know, obviously, look, she got happier there. Did you notice that? I'm aware that you're not going to be able to do a deal and get it completed before the 26th. But what you can do is say, if you reserve before the 26th, or even if it's a stock plot, if you exchange before the 26th, I'll do this for you and I'll do that for you. Part exchange, if you're able to offer it, is massively strong at times like this. And then thirdly, what about budget-proof incentives? Stamp duty, the second most hated tax in the UK after inheritance tax, and you can just wipe it away, can't you? So never discount, pay their stamp duty instead. So keep the value of the product high, but make them happy. And look how happy she's getting now, knowing that no matter what the government does to stamp duty in the budget, they don't have to worry, because if they reserve before the 26th, you'll pay it for them. Bingo. And then finally, help your salespeople, get your IFAs involved. Do a little bit of a comparison. So if you do wait till the budget arrives, well, that could happen and that could happen, but we're going to do this. Whereas if you bought now, so one word of caution there, please remind all of your sales teams that they are legally not allowed to offer financial advice. That's very important. Make sure your IFA does that, but get your IFA working very, very hard. Those IFAs over the next 3 weeks should be working 18 hours a day minimum. That's it. 3 weeks to the budget. Budget paralysis, I see it as a window of opportunity because everyone's going to suffer with it. You just got to be better than the next guy. I'm staying with my forecast of annual inflation that I had since last December, unlike our friends at Savills. And I'm saying that new home share may well finish above the long run average of 10%, probably going to be closer to 11.5%. PX, stamp duty indemnity, pre-budget deals, you've got the opportunity to do all of that. And I'll leave you with this. This saying was originally credited to Cora L.V. Hatch. Cora Hatch in 1859. Crazy name, crazy person. But since then, I think it's now, well, James Dean had it in a song, Thomas S. Monson, even Dolly Parton. There's nothing you can do about the market. It's beyond the wit or the power of any of us. But you can change the way that you manage it. You can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. And I leave you with that. And I apologize for running over a few minutes.
Do you know what, Matt? I have to thank you because you make me look quiet. And that's difficult to do, Matt, but you've succeeded today. So congratulations. Look, if we can come off the PowerPoint now, if that's possible.
Hang
Matt.
on a minute. Let me get a shot of that. Hold on. I need to get I've lost my mouth. There it is. There it is.
Brilliant. I can get everybody. Just want to say a massive thank you. I'm just conscious of time. I think I'd scheduled it for 10:30. I want to ask the audience actually two things. One, I don't want to leave it so people don't ask Matt questions. But two, I'm conscious of everyone's time and my thought process, and we can maybe have a show of hands. Do you want 10 or 15 minutes to grill Matt and for us to reschedule Nick rather than move straight on to Nick and everybody be short of time? So if you would prefer me to have Nick schedule the next forum, would that be better? Could we have a show of hands if you'd like to have 10 or 15 minutes with Matt now, and maybe because of time for everybody, reschedule Nick, or would you like us to go straight on? So could we have a show of hands maybe to ask Matt some questions, and I can schedule Nick in for another time? Right. How are the hands looking? I can see 6 hands, I think, that are saying 7.
There's, I think there might be a little bit of a lag.
Yeah. I just want to get a gauge on it, Nick, because I want to do justice to yours.
Tell you what you should do to make sure everybody's on. Tell everyone to put their hand up, and the people that don't put their hand up are the ones you could reverse it. But
well, I've got everyone's hand up. What about now if we take our hands down and would like Nick to present, maybe with 5 minutes questions from Matt? And we need to move fast on this, just because time's running. Anna, can we get a gauge of it at the moment?
Starting from now.
Yeah, hands for Nick to come on now or in 5 minutes once we ask a couple of questions to Matt.
Feels like a competition, this.
Well, it's not a competition.
I know. You will be voted off.
Goalkeeper.
Traitors tonight, isn't it? Now, here's the thing, while we're thinking about those hands, it's traitors tonight. I'm at the bloody house builders at the O2. Someone is going to say, aren't they? Someone. How it's like that old whatever happened to the Likely Lads thing where they didn't want to know the football result, you know? I'm going to find out who celebrity traitor.
I think, Nick, we've had you up. I think it would be good for people to ask Matt some questions. I'm seeing a few people. We're down to 54 from 62. So some people have allocated time. Nick, with your blessing, what I'd like to do is to schedule you for another time. and it gives an opportunity for everyone, perhaps including yourself, and maybe you can kick off with grilling Matt with a question he can't answer, having him taken some of your time. So over to you, Nick, to kick off with your questions. I'm sure you'll enjoy asking Matt a question.
Well, to be honest, I can probably summarise everything I was going to say, which is market's pretty crap and prices are going to go up again. So that's from a material perspective. No, I'll hand it over to the other guys to ask questions in terms of time. So I'll let everyone else carry on.
Okay. Yeah. So who's got a question for Matt?
We've
got any hands coming up, Anna?
That's the sort of question.
I'll tell you what, I'll stick my hand up, Dad. So Matt, just interested to know, you were talking about most of your clients, top 10 national house builders. So if you were going to give one bit of advice, and there's some really good takeaways from that presentation, you know, around the PX and things, but if there was something that you could think off the top of your head now that is more specific to SMEs rather than, you know, across the board with all types of house builders for this market and where we are at the moment, what would that be?
It's a really interesting question, and it's not. I know what I'm going to say, but it is not a nice answer to give. But whenever I go, because don't forget, it doesn't matter how big the builder is. It doesn't matter whether you're a Barratt Redrow with 380 sites. Each individual site carries its own individual issues and problems. Just the same as if you were an R&B doing that site and that's your only site. That there comes at times like this. The first question, the first discussion you have to have is margin against cash flow, because the provided you do everything right. There is I did a presentation. I did went up, did the Cameron Day up in the Midlands the week before last, and I ended it with some stuff that if I put on this deck now, you'd think, how dare he tell us that? We know all that stuff, but before you have the conversation about what do we do next, make absolutely sure all your ducks are in a row. Make sure presentation looks absolutely fucking immaculate. Make sure everyone is geared up. Make sure you're communicating with your frontline salespeople. You know, if you go around, you know, I know a lot of the big builders get criticized for lots of things, but generally, you walk on a Carla home site. They're probably one of our biggest clients. You walk on a Carla site, it looks beautiful. It always looks beautiful. Everything looks right. All the signage is clean and well presented. You know, make sure there's no flappy stuff on Harris fencing or builders burning a bit of wood in the, you know, the hygiene stuff. When I know that's awful, you know, it's granny sucking egg stuff, but it's amazing how many sites I walk onto and I think, oh my goodness, you know, you're killing yourself. So once you're sure all the basics are right, once you're sure all your data collection is good and solid, so you're collecting it in a way that you can legally use it, that's so important right now. When you've done all that, then it's a conversation to be had, and it's right. Do we sit and hold out on these plots or this plot that's roofed unsold or up to play, or do we take a bit of pain? And if you decide to take a bit of pain, here's my tip. So if you're going to take a little bit of margin pain, don't go public with it. So you only offer that bit of margin pain to people that have already been to site, and you only offer. I tell you what's really powerful at the moment, and even with the biggest developers, I've sat and written these letters, write to somebody, or, you know, I mean, ink on paper, and post, you know, through the letterbox. You'd be amazed. It used to be they talk about rubbish in the mail. Well, now emails, you delete them 10 at a time, don't you? So email campaigns, that nowadays is the big shotgun splurge. You put together a deal to someone that has already been to site, and you write to them and you tell them it's confidential and it's for their eyes only, and here's the deal. And if you want my advice on what that giveaway should be based around, it would be stamp duty, or at least fixing things so that whatever happens in the budget, they'll be no worse off. So sorry, Aaron, I've prevaricated. To answer your question really simply, number one, make sure you're doing the basics right. Hugely important. Number two, make sure you're collecting the data right. And then number three, make a decision on cash flow or margin. And if you want to get that away, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of margin, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Matt. Stephen Brazier from Aquina Homes. Stephen, lovely to have you on the call. You've got a question for Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Really good presentation, very thought-provoking as always, and presented in a really entertaining way. So thank you for that. And
thank you. Thank you.
Great to see someone make economics quite interesting. So well done on that. You referenced a number of things there, and the uncertainty being, I think, a sort of major factor from my perspective at the moment. And you also were suggesting, go now before the budget. I'm just wondering whether we're just pushing water uphill at the moment, and we're predominantly high-end product and high selling prices. The budget's 3 weeks away. Like any marketing initiative, it's always more exciting on the day of reveal or the week after reveal. I just wonder if we are going to get this interest rate cut today, if we're going to know and therefore reduce some uncertainty, whether we like it or not is neither here nor there. I mean, it does provide a bit more certainty and a bit more of a framework within which we can work. But I wonder whether we're better off actually holding back on the initiatives until after that, or I sense at the moment that at the very top end that there just isn't a market, and you could cut prices into a market which doesn't exist and not generate a customer. It feels to me that we almost need a bit more certainty, and we need a few more people who are perhaps holding back on moves to come back into the market and to think, actually, we know what the framework is now. We now need to get on with it. And I'm thinking that perhaps we're better off waiting till the new year or till this infamous Boxing Day craze on Rightmove to launch rather than now.
I think that's a brilliant point, and I agree 100%. My delivery and my advice is coloured by the fact that I work mainly for volume developers, and they can't wait. So because the pressure on, if you've got 100 live sites, pressure on going 3 or 4 weeks without a sale is absolutely intense. And so there is a little bit of margin sacrifice. But that is why I completely agree, Stephen. And I think that that's when I said, about your tips. Well, do the basics right, and then sit down and have a conversation and say cash flow or margin. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that if you are going to get those deals while there's this uncertainty, it's going to cost you margin, and it may well be better, depending on your situation, to sit tight and wait. So I'm not disagreeing, and I'm really pleased that you've raised it, because it's such an important point. I think what I'm saying is every situation is different. So number one, get everything that is in your control, it's in your gift. Make sure you're doing that as well as it can possibly be done. And then when it comes to what do we do about upping our sales rate or grabbing additional market share or whatever, do we want to sacrifice that margin, or do we want to wait rather than fight this uncertainty? Then that's in each individual business will have its own individual needs and would need to make that decision accordingly.
Matt, thank you. I think it's been incredible what you've covered with us, Matt. Nick may not completely agree with that.
I'm so sorry, Nick. It was not a deliberate thing, I promise you.
No. But Matt, look. Demand stimulus, selling houses at the moment is the most vital thing. Clearly, Nick's got a great discussion in terms of energy prices, supply chain, materials, what's going to be the outlook. Nick, with your blessing and the fact that we've been on the call the time we have, I think it makes absolute sense. If you agree, Anna, that we schedule, I think it makes sense so that you get the complete focus. We've still got 46 on the call, and I'm happy to continue it, but I'm just conscious that we've had quite a coverage from Matt. And I think it'd be nice, Nick, to kick yours off sharp and first, if you feel the same way, Nick. So what are your thoughts on that? And I've got 46 on the call, which is a big audience anyway. And if they want to hear from you, I'm more than happy. But I think we might run more people dropping out, and I don't want that. It won't do justice to what you're doing.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll go with the consensus, but yeah, happy to pick up again. And the only thing I'd mention, obviously, is when we're talking about anything I was going to present, a lot of it will lead into next year's thoughts. So if I was going to present, I want to it'd probably be before the year end, because we're talking a lot about what's going to happen with manufacturers and what they're going to try and push through the marketplace next calendar year.
Well, I mean, Anna, if everyone puts their hand up and would like to listen to it, we will accommodate it, so we can run with you, Nick, in terms of that. Well, do people want to put their hands up if they're going to need to leave? I think it's only going to be 15 minutes, Nick, isn't it? So you're on mute, Nick.
I'll cut out some of the stuff at the front and just go to the most pertinent parts.
I think 6 are going, so I think maybe why don't we run with you? We can always share stuff with those that have to leave subsequently, Nick. So let's move. Why don't we do that? Why don't you run into it? And I think, can we just show our appreciation to Matt? It was long, but it was worthwhile. So thank you very much indeed, Matt.
It's a pleasure.
It's such a privilege to have you on this forum.
Not at all.
And we'll kick over. If you'd like to stay on it, Matt, it'd be nice for you to see what my fellow director at Stark is doing. He's been in the industry a long time. So over to you, Nick.
Yeah, so I'll very quickly just try and summarise these slides very quickly. So essentially, I've been in the industry 20 years, just monitoring and watching and working in various different strategic functions in the business. The consolidation in the industry is probably one of the big things to reference. That's not just builders, merchants, I'm talking, or even house building. It's also suppliers, manufacturers, the limited number of suppliers that we can deal with as a national merchant, or even if we're a regional merchant. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges from an industry perspective when it comes to a number of things. And then we've got this significant inflation that's probably kicked in mostly, obviously, post-COVID. Many years gone by, I was monitoring the market, and we'd have marginal volume growth and then 2-3% in material price increases every year, and it was fairly boring, but it was very easy to monitor. But now it's become a real challenge, and the biggest challenge also we have is the ONS data is just dreadful. It's very hard to monitor a lot of the data from an industry perspective on either pricing or volumes moving through. And this next slide was just something I was asked by our group. Can you provide a slide on bad news? And obviously that could have been many slides, but a lot of that's already been picked up. So I'll just crack on here. Basically, I won't bother going into oil prices. There's no real expectations that there's any change. It's so volatile as a market, it's very hard to forecast. But it is a big driver of cost inputs to many of our manufacturers that supply through the builders merchants. And this is just a very quick chart on where we're expecting that factor of oil, which often does drive into the gas prices as well, is that even though there is some downward trends from developing economies, the developed economies, the developing economies will pick up that slack, as will the whole petrochemical industry as well. So that manufacturing requirement of oil will still mean that oil prices will stay either where they are or generally increase, is the forecast, notwithstanding any geopolitical shocks. UK main challenge, that compound effect of inflation for me is the biggest issue. We always talk, there's references, it's coming down, and that's where we might see a base rate cut, but it's a compound effect, and I can't do the building material compound effects, but it's because the data's disappeared in 2025 from the government, but it is still around 40% plus up when you look at the compound effects from pre-COVID. So it's a huge increase in the overall build cost, whether that's to an extension or even into the new build sector. And this is just a very quick slide showing what we see as an industry in the builders merchant. So this year to date, so this takes us up to August. September's going to be out later today, I hope. But the values are up for builders merchants. This represents vast majority of the builders merchant industry. Maybe about 70-80% of the market is covered here. And obviously that's selling probably 20 to 30% into new builds and probably 70%-ish into repair, maintenance, improvements. And you can see there, this is where the market is. So volumes are up 2.5%, but values up 0.8, which means the industry is struggling to pass through price. So it's been a challenging year. Obviously, when volumes are difficult, there is more challenge on price. In the industry, that's just a standard demand volume issue. And the other thing we've seen as an industry, obviously, is mentioned a bit there by Matt, that the property transactions are up, but what we see as a challenge is that the link to home improvement has dropped. So where home improvement, you would have had maybe 1 in 5 new transactions in the open market, second-hand market, if you like, doing a major improvement project. It's now probably about more like 1 in 6.8, 6.7 is the data we've got hold of. So that's causing a bit of an issue. Obviously, the number of builders is still the same, so there's still work out there and builders are still busy. It's just the volume of those projects, potentially the volume of the projects coming through to improve a home. So that's the wraparound extension which needs planning, etc., or the high value projects. So from a new build point of view, are we going to see a bit of a change? Because the sheer cost to do an extension now can often run into 6 figures if you're looking for anything 2-story. You are, to get that 3rd or 4th bedroom or whatever it may be, is it now going to be more financially beneficial to actually move home rather than improve? So that whole mantra of improve, don't move could be shifting around the other way. So that's something to consider from a marketing perspective. Then this is just where we see the industry going. So I sit on the forecast panel for the CPA. We've had to downgrade the forecast in autumn as sentiments weakened. Probably the data the panel members were seeing feeding through in the summer. Certainly the first half was driven mostly by heavy side and house building, but that has dropped off. The R&I market just remains flat, I would say, at best. And no surprise, you're all very much aware that obviously these challenges we've got in London with high rise, the planning delays in BSR, etc., sort of just been factored into that forecast reducing, but they're still expecting, this is a pound note output expectation rather than completions, that there will be a 2% growth and 4% next year. My view on completions this year, when I look at all of the various PLC players at least, it's probably flat on completions, because the Barratt Redrow thing has caused a bit of an issue, and Vistry have dropped off a lot. So from the majors, it looks like 0 to 1 to 2% at best on completions for this calendar year, just as a guide. And then when we're monitoring the industry, obviously we have to bear in mind that where we source all our products from, and mostly it is from UK manufacturers. In the industry, about 3/4 of the products used in construction manufactured in the UK. Obviously, they are down and linked to the raw material input costs, of which energy is a huge part of that. So if you're in heavy side, that can be 25 to over 30% of your input cost can be the energy. So what happens with gas, oil is massively important. Labour cost, the other huge part of the cost, and as we all know, with the changes in the last budget and the impact that's had on everyone's labour cost, adding tens of millions of pounds, or even to our over £10 million to our labour cost this year. So there's a huge chunk of labour that inflation passing through the industry at the moment, and still feeding through. And then there's no belief there's going to be any sort of capacity issues. There's been a little bit around, there's a few factory fires that have happened, and there's a few issues in terms of timber mills reducing capacity, but that's more to do with volume globally. So there is talk about some changes in timber pricing at the moment, and then heavy side probably more going the other direction is what we're hearing. And this is the latest tender price forecast out. I think the most recent one I've got hold of is the Arcadis one. I always have a look at. And they were expecting this 3 to 6% growth every year. And most of that was labour. They were expecting minimal material inflation into 2026, but I think they've probably underbaked it based on what the suppliers are feeding through to us. I mean, I'd expect next year, but HBM will be the higher driver of inflationary costs. Yeah, we're still negotiating with those suppliers at the moment. Timber been more of a global product. There is probably been a oversupply and then a reduction of supply, but there is still lots of timber out there on the sea and in the ports. So there could be a little bit of movement downwards, perhaps. It's difficult to tell at the moment. Light side building materials, so that can be anything from hand tools, power tools, etc. I've not got some guidance yet on where the paints type of products are going, but more like the hand tools generally seem to be relatively low digit inflation compared to other sectors. And yeah, the main one is just engaging with whoever your suppliers are, manufacturers, just to get a guidance on those price rises expected coming through to try and help you with planning forward for next year. Okay, and that was the end.
Nick, I have to say,
is that okay?
That was fantastic.
Sorry to rush through it.
No, Nick, that was absolutely, everyone stayed on the call. Great slides. Can I just say to everybody, I've only been with Stark for 12 months. Nick has been unbelievable in helping me shape the strategy. He's passionate behind SME house builders. He's been in the industry a long time, wealth of experience, and he's helped me shape it. So I'm indebted to you personally, Nick, but I think the audience, and we've got over 40 people, will benefit hugely from that, because certainty, as Matt's talking about, materials is a key area. And we saw what happened in COVID with 20% rises. And it was about getting hold of the product. You'd pay whatever because you had to complete a home. So I think you've probably shared some pretty encouraging news overall in terms of some certainty from the barometers that you're measuring to get a gauge of things. Can I open the floor to anyone to ask Nick or actually myself any questions in that arena before I bring things to a close? Come on, James Ahern, surely you must have a question. I can see you.
When you say good news, when we're talking about, cost increases year after year after year.
I didn't say who for, James.
Oh, okay. Good news for manufacturers.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
At what point?
Overall, if you look at heavy side, if you look at light side, and if you look across the piece, one, we don't see there to be a demand challenge in terms of suppliers not being able to supply. And obviously that's based upon the information that obviously Matt shared and what Nick has been working on for 25 plus years. So that's good that you'll be able to get product, because if the market picks up and you can't get product, you've got a challenge. And also, if you look at material prices as a complete bundle for a home, it's not going to be, there's not going to be any significant, there'll be some coming up, some slightly going down, some perhaps staying the same. So overall, if you look at the basket of materials that you need to build a home, Nick, please call me on it.
Yeah, I'm probably a bit more cynical, having been in this industry a while, that, the manufacturers do have a lot of levers they can pull to some extent, and one of those, obviously, when they were ramping up probably this year in expectation of higher volume growth, and that's not fed through, so they're not hitting the numbers they expected, nor probably most of us in this industry this year, and that leads you to a point of, what do? Do you then reduce capacity to try and hold price to some extent? If you talk about basic supply demand, and that's probably the bit I'm trying to unpick at the moment, is what's can the manufacturer, what's going to happen in terms of supply reducing supply to try and, we know where I'm going with this, but it's a very sensitive subject, so I'm just being careful what I say.
Yeah. Nick, thank you. Mark White, Bargate Homes, HBF, Future Homestead, I don't know how many, non-exec, and so it goes on, Mark.
It does, which is kind of where my question's going to come from. So it's a two-part question. And again, a few of us attended the fantastic event that Stark did with the regional directors the other day. So it's a two-part question too. I get everything, prices are rising. We've had the problem with gas and oil and everything else.
Yeah.
Now that's stabilizing. One, will the manufacturers actually start bringing their prices down when the cost of fuel comes down? Because it can, should, and will. But secondly, the net zero transition plan, obviously the government are trying to push us to get to as much reduced carbon in our build as possible. How is that going to affect your market when we're looking at actually getting rid of diesel vehicles, going to doing the HVO, oil or electric? Are we going to find that there's not enough infrastructure for your lorries to be able to charge? Are we going to have smaller deliveries? Are we going to be actually having more cost rises because of the net zero transition plan?
Yeah, I think, we're still on an early journey of there. We have had some vehicles replaced. We do find that it's very difficult to get a very large wagon to be in that new format, to be able to have that capacity and load capacity. So we're still going to have to be running, at least in short medium term, more traditional vehicles for the very large wagons. The cost elements, like with anything, move to net zero, it all comes with cost. It's so it has to be there's only so much can be absorbed, and like anything, we have to try and do things as smartly as possible in terms of our cost base, but as does the manufacturers. And I think the main challenge we've got, is when you've got a depressed or stagnant market, and there's still prices feeding through, and that's a massive challenge for us. And it's a massive, because we are we're in the middle.
You are the same. In the past, we've always hidden bad news in inflation rises and in house prices. Now that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how, as an industry, we're going to cope with more cost rises based on something that's being forced early. Let's be honest. So the government signed up to 2050 to be in the thing, but everyone's really pushing on for 2030. Yeah. And the people that get the brunt end of that will be manufacturers, suppliers, and the construction industry. I'm not sure how we can, or in this forum being the right one, Ed, we've got to start looking at the SME market. Is there a different transition plan that we could go along with? Because quite frankly, we could all sit here until 2049 and go, right, I'm not going to change until then, because we're taking every pinch point. Now, the majors I'm fairly sure they're going to start leading with, wonderful compounds that have got electric chargers and bloody turbines, or whichever they're going to be doing it on. I don't know how the SME market's going to cope with being forced yet another cost added just because someone in Parliament has decided they're going to be pushing for an early transition.
It's a great question, Mark, and I think the role that we can play is and clearly is to work with manufacturers to understand and uncover true costs, efficiencies, and ways that we can work together so that we leave enough food on the table for everybody. We all look at how we become more efficient and more effective in what we do, which is key, Mark, so that actually we look after the people that actually keep our companies in business. Because without your buyers, you don't build houses. If you don't build houses, we can't supply you materials. If we don't supply you materials, the manufacturers can't supply us. And so it goes forward. So if some people are stockpiling and then holding prices, it's going to long-term impact them, but it's going to impact the complete supply chain from the potential buyer right the way back to the manufacturer. And I think the relationships I hope you saw last week at our launch with 50 plus, with probably 10 manufacturers with a turnover in excess of 80 billion, and we had vice presidents, MDs of those businesses, perhaps says that we are trying to do our bit, one, to support SME house builders, but two, to create that greater transparency and openness, but also a deeper understanding of what impact people do has on the merchant, has on the house builder, and has on the potential for that SME to sell more properties. And that is going to take time, but I think we are doing our bit, and I'm putting on my day job company hat as a director at Stark UK. We are absolutely doing our bit. And I'm sure you've seen that evidenced, not just in words, but in actions, Mark. But what you raised is a very, very key point, and we're on it, but we're reliant on others doing the right thing as well, Mark, you know? So thank you for that question. I'm conscious we're coming up to 11 o'clock. Is there any other burning questions from anybody?
One from
Joe Jelly.
Yeah.
Joe Jelly.
Hi, good morning.
Hi,
I'll
Joe.
be quick because I need to go myself. Just a quick question really for Stark and Nick. It's something that we've been facing. We've had difficulties with Guildford Borough Council. Be interested to see if any other developers are in the same situation. It's again on the supply side. One of our planning conditions that we're now faced with is that we now need to prove the carbon embodiment of our materials that we use on site, and that is going from bricks, tiles, blocks, things of that nature. And I think that's probably going to get worse. And I'll ask for more detail on that. What that means for us is it's actually very difficult to provide that information because a lot of the suppliers don't have it. Also, what it does mean is that we are more and more having to source the majority of our materials from the UK, which I don't have a problem with. I think that's a great thing to do, but obviously that comes with a cost implication. So it was just a quick question. Are Stark aware of that? How can you help? And, you know, it's just another concern that it's just another inflationary cost aspect that we're going to have to take on board with everything else that we're dealing with at the moment.
Did you want me to grab that one, Nick?
Yeah, you start with that one, Adrian. Let me just
just quickly. The answer is yes, Joe. We've got a sustainability director, so what? But we're doing stuff on that, and we recognise a lot of the local authorities, housing associations we deal with. It's a prerequisite that we need to look at the embodied carbon and footprint, etc., etc. So again, let's take it offline in terms of looking after you, but clearly for anyone else on the forum, that is something that we are progressing with, and we've got things in place to support you in that context. Nick, was there anything you wanted to add before I bring things to a complete close?
No, that covers it nicely for the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll take that, Joe. But you know me, so just give us a shout. Can I just thank everybody? Thank my two fellow directors, Aaron and Anna, for getting things moving, to taking it to the next level. Matt, we want you on our Christmas event. We've got the date for that. We need you in a lovely Christmas outfit. Santa will be fine, whatever outfit, but you are definitely going to be on it. We need you there. We might make you our mascot for the R&B Housebuilder Forum. How about that? So,
yeah, a mascot. Okay, what are the perks? What are the benefits to that?
Well,
out of interest?
I mean, with that to be agreed, Matt.
Free
I was going to
Jameson.
say, with your advice, Matt, we'll keep it hidden and we'll write you a private letter.
Yes, that's it. I like
Very
it. Yeah. But seriously, Nick, wonderful executive summary. I think we can share certain things out with the audience. We are doing our bit at Stark. Matt, again, massive congratulations. And again, thank you to the audience, because this forum is what it is because of everyone who is contributing to it. So to the founding members, to the recent members, thank you for making this. We're going to set up a forum next month. We'll make it light, we'll make it enjoyable, and there'll be a big glass of G&T by my side in December. And we're going to have Matt joining us in whatever outfit. He's got no excuse now. It's on screen. It's been recorded. You will be joining us.
Well, I'm hoping that look, there's 30 people still on this call. I'm hoping every single one of them that is going to be tuned into Radio Wimborne at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. If I'm getting up at 5, yeah,
okay.
Just say to Siri or Alexa or whatever else device you've got, play Radio Wimborne.
Radio Wimborne.
That's it. It's that easy. or go online, radiowimborne.co.uk. But if I'm getting up at 5 a.m. tomorrow, I'm not getting in after the House Builder Awards till 2 a.m., you deserve to blooming well join me at 7. Come on.
I'm going to put that in my 7 o'clock a.m.
Help me share the pain. Share the pain.
Yeah. Thank you both. Fantastic. Great for our audience. And we'll be sending a note out reference December's party forum. Okay.
Lovely to see you again, Anna, as well, by the way.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all. Great presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.